And we are now live.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is the Vermont State Senate Committee on Institutions. Today is April 12th, 2022. I am Joe Benning, your host for this afternoon's festivities, and we have along with us on the committee Senator Mazza from Colchester Grand Isle, Senator Ingalls from Essex Orleans, Senator McCormick from Windsor County, and Senator Parent from Franklin County. We're here in the midst of our conversations that are ongoing this week over the capital bill. And specifically for this afternoon's festivities to begin, we're going to be talking about Section 3, the Agency of Human Services, and the nursing school program, simulation laboratories, renovation expansion, capital grants that might be available. We have several folks who are going to be lined up as witnesses. And for those of you that have never been to Senate institutions before, let me offer that we are live on YouTube with an audience that we don't have any idea what the makeup of that audience is. So as you are testifying, the very first thing we would ask each witness to do is identify themselves, give us a little tiny biography so that the folks who may be out there watching may know who you are. And then we'll dive into the conversation. Should you, in the midst of the conversation, use some vernacular that we and you might be familiar with, but in my mind, it red flags for our audience a potential problem that they may not understand it, I may interrupt your testimony, not to be rude, but just to say, what does X, Y, or Z mean? And we'll keep the audience on the same page that we are. With all of that having been said, Representative Ann Donoghue is with us, and you are the first on tap. So, Ann, welcome to Senate Institutions.
Thank you very much, Representative Ann Donoghue. I'm the Vice Chair of the House Health Care Committee, and we were asked by the Commerce Committee in the House to really provide the major input in the workforce initiatives there specific to the healthcare workforce. And if we start going from top down, workforce crisis to healthcare workforce crisis, and within that, one of the major pieces is the nursing workforce crisis. Our goal ended up really being to focus on getting more nursing students through and graduated with a target of doubling from 600 graduates a year to 1,200 a year to help build that workforce. There are other pieces as well, but that was key. And also recognizing the need to move quickly because there's a lag time from nurses going into training and being out and available to practice. So that meant focusing on the schools of nursing's ability to increase the number of students. Two issues that were key in that was ability to attract and retain faculty, because faculty are paid so significantly less than clinical peers, and the other one was physical space for the simulation labs for upgrades to them. And of course, those are what the students practice on before they get to real people. These are amazing mannequins. I've been on a tour once, you know, you do the wrong thing, they yell ouch and all of that. But we heard from a lot of witnesses. We heard from the Hospital Association, the Vermont State Colleges, Norwich, and ultimately also from Senator Sanders with his workforce nursing crisis recommendations. Focusing on this is a really key thing, is the simulation labs being upgraded and expanded. And for that reason, it became one of our key recommendations. And on the House side, that was put in the capital bill. There was a little offline discussion after testimony and so forth. The assumption was always there that this would be a shared cost with nursing schools and the state contribution. By it being in the capital bill, my understanding is that means our piece can be the physical plant pieces, and the high-tech equipment would need to be their piece because the capital bill wouldn't cover that. But that's way outside my sphere of legislative expertise on how those things work. But that's the bottom line. This is really, for us, a very critical part of the workforce initiatives around the nursing shortage crisis and enabling the schools to have a greater capacity for students. they turned down more than 100, they know all their numbers, of course, applicants last year. So it's not that it's not a question of applicants, they don't have capacity.
Senator Ingles.
Did Senator Sanders offer any federal monies, or did they come up with any type of program that we might be able to leverage some federal dollars?
I think they have for some aspects of the healthcare workforce. I think some of that's filtering down. But this came out of the joint press conference that he held with the governor and the speaker and the pro town about the nursing crisis. And we finally, it took us a while, it took us near the end of our time before we finally got connected with his staff and their identification of the greatest needs. We were really happy that a lot of what we had ended up doing were on his list of, after their staff consulted with many of the same groups, but came up with the same key recommendations, and this was on that list.
So about 5 months ago, I attended a press conference at Linden, now NVU Linden, where Senators Sanders, Leahy, and Congressman Welch all appeared, talking about federal money that we're bringing to the nursing program. Has that been taken into account with this particular expenditure? And the reason that I'm asking, so let me back up a little bit. I have no question about the need, absolutely. The question though is, $4 million has been designated. All of a sudden, by the House side, it never appeared in the governor's recommend. Is the request coordinated in some fashion with the federal money coming in? I don't know if this is in your bailiwick or not, but I'm raising that question. If you can't answer, hopefully somebody else on the witness list today can.
Yeah, I'm gonna take a pass on that because the money's that we were all policy input, so.
And in the amount of the 4 million, was there some guidance by Senator Sanders or anybody as far as that amount of that was the number that was needed?
There was not, and we had a somewhat limited, within our time frame, somewhat limited ability to really hone in on the best number. We did get a direct estimate from one of the nursing schools from Norwich saying it was about $600,000. There are 14 sites in Vermont. I think the need is clearly for more than that, and that's why we put kind of a prioritization language around which ones would result in the greatest increase in capacity for taking nursing students.
Other questions, committee?
Just one last one, just so I can just wrap my brain around it. So 4 million is going to try to get how many nurses graduated? I mean, you said that there was 100 that didn't make the program. Is this in response to get 100 more nurses into the workforce, or the 4 million is going to set up just one place, one of these labs? Just to wrap my head around where that is.
Now, the goal over the next several years is to go from this current 600 graduates a year to 1,200, to double that.
Right.
And the need for the simulation labs is across the state, both for upgrade and for larger capacity. So it's multiple sites, not one. And
one of these labs is $600,000.
one of them said that to do the enlargement and upgrade that they needed at their site, it would be 600,000. We had that as one example.
That was Norwich.
Yeah, right, that was Norwich's estimate. We did not get estimates from the others in terms of the actual numbers.
Yeah, not very often we put 4 million into one program we know a little about. Was this a request in the governor's proposal last fall, do you know, rejected?
I don't believe that it was a request for the governor. It was not in the governor's recommend. You know, that actually I have very little familiarity of the Capitol Hill work. So I know it is recommended in terms of workforce overall and nursing workforce, which didn't reference this. So
Yeah, because it's always handy to know how it who rejected it or how it came about. 4 million without much testimony, that's a lot of money to throw in on a new program that we know very little about.
Right, we had a lot of testimony on the need for these expansions.
Oh, I'm sure you did. Yeah,
But-
there is a need, but
Yeah,
it just doesn't give us much time.
right.
Is there a game plan associated with the money? For instance, when is X number of dollars going to be spent for planning purposes? When is X going to be expected for actual carpentry work? What is the,
Yeah, no, we turn that over, making it expeditious as a goal, we turn that over to I believe it's the Department of Health that is supposed to take applications and prioritize them based on how many students it will enable and, how rapidly they move on it. But it's assumed to be a one shot. It's not like over a number of years. They've identified this as an immediate short time need, so it's a turnaround to get this engaged right away.
no quarrel that there is a need, something that could be dealt with immediately if we had the ability to do that. Part of this committee's responsibility is to look at how long a project would take. Do we hang up money on the wall while certain things happen in the normal sequence of events that something gets built? And I'm wondering if there's anybody that is able to tell us what the game plan is. Or is this simply a request for a chunk of money to be dealt with by the Department of Health and then done whatever their schedule happens to be? And I guess I'll extend that a little bit by saying, take HVAC systems, for instance, in this building. We know they all have to be replaced in order to bring us up to snuff. But in order to have them put in, there has to be a game plan that anticipates what do you need first, planning. Architecturally, how do you do it? That also is something that comes with time. And then eventually, when are you going to hit the first nail on the head with a hammer? And how do you coordinate that with the legislature being in session? That all takes years, not months. And as a result of that, sometimes we reserve a lot of the money that was originally requested because we have other places that could be spent, as opposed to leaving it in a bank account somewhere for instance, in this case, the Department of Health to dole out when they want to. So I'm trying to figure out whether anybody has a game plan in mind that can explain to us what exactly their intent is with how they spend the money, when, and what for.
I think that is the testimony you will get from the schools in terms of, their immediate need and how quickly they would be able to move on it.
Okay. Committee, other questions?
No. So he's doing a good job with that for Thomas. What your survey is.
Well, hope you had a wonderful time here at
Thank
Senate
you,
Institute.
I did, especially with the candy I pocketed.
Take more, they're free.
Well, I'm gonna try one of these, so I have
Those are
one of
delicious.
each, okay?
Thank you.
Yeah, our
You
committee,
may get me back.
our committee led council has a real passion for those, so at least leave her one.
Okay. Good to know.
Thanks for coming in. Take care.
Thank you.
I have Rosemary Dale up next from the University of Vermont's College of Nursing and Health Services, who's chair of the Department of Nursing. Rosemary, are you on my screen somewhere? If you can wave and let us know who you are.
Got tulips behind her.
The one with the tulips behind her. I'm assuming you are not outside live and that's a screenshot of another day in spring somewhere else in the world. Welcome to Senate Institutions.
Great, thanks so much for asking me. I want to give you the information that you're going to find most helpful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend 1 minute telling you how we currently use our SimLab. Can you all hear me well enough?
Yes.
Okay, great. At the University of Vermont, we have 600 students, 500 undergraduates, 600 graduate students. About 15% of their clinical time is spent in the simulation lab. So it supplements the time that they would ordinarily spend in a clinical agency. And it gives us the ability to use the clinical agencies the best we can. Let me give you a very specific example. If you send a student to obstetrics to learn to assist in a delivery of a baby, and the student goes over and for 2 days there's no baby delivered, it's not a particularly worthwhile experience. We can send them to the sim lab with high-tech mannequins and simulated patients, and they can watch that delivery on schedule as planned. So it's a very expeditious way to orient students and to give them that experience. I would tell you here at the University of Vermont, nursing certainly uses the simulation lab, but we also share it with medicine, all of the other disciplines on campus, the Medical Center Hospital of Vermont, first responders, and all of the ambulance and transport corps. So it's extensively used. Our use at this point is Sunday to Sunday. We use it in the evening and we use it until 10 o'clock at night. We use it Saturday and Sunday. I would say probably we don't use it holidays, but I think that like Christmas and Easter. But I think other than that, the area is 100% used. As I understand it, the money that you might have available is capital money. And we're in a situation now where unless we increase our physical structure, we cannot enlarge our sim lab. We are so space compressed. So I do know that our senior vice president for facilities does have something very rough on the books. Would there be a hammer to nail in a year? I certainly, I can't speak to that. That's out of my scope. But I can tell you that without some capital improvement, some capital enlargement, we can't move. We can't increase our space in that area.
So it's not a question of having the simulators. This is money that would be designed for capital expenditures?
Well, that was what I understood when I was listening to Representative Donahue, that there was $4 million potentially put aside for capital associated with simulation. We certainly need additional mannequins, additional high-tech mannequins, additional other equipment. I didn't mean to suggest that we don't, but if this money were directed towards capital, we can't move very much more with increasing our physical plant.
Well, I was going to say, I'm surprised to hear that there are actually high-tech mannequins out there that say, ouch.
There are.
I've got several legislators I might ask that volunteer to take that role. But,
we'd love to have them.
For another day, I shouldn't get in trouble. In any event, does UVM have any plans on the books at this moment to talk about what kind of expansion would take place?
Yeah, I have seen some rough drawings. They're not architectural drawings. They're rough drawings. So what UVM would do would be to add on to a specific section of the Rowell building. So I would say yes.
Okay. Committee, questions?
Yeah, if we said, well, here's the money, how long before that money turned into progress?
Well, as you all know, building it at this point in the state of Vermont and probably everywhere else is difficult to get off the ground. So there's permitting, there's workmen, there's supplies. So I can't give you a good answer, but I can pretty well say at least 18 to 24 months.
So we'd be looking from 18 to 36 months, well, probably even longer, 18 to 48 months before the first additional nurse that we'd be a benefactor of a graduated nurse.
Probably. I think that's fair. If I'm wrong, I apologize. You probably know better about You probably know better about construction than I do. I can tell you they've got a vision, they've got a basic plan.
Well, even if, once you complete the structure, you still have to get the nurse through the program. So on
Yes.
top of what the structure would be,
Mhm.
then you have to put time to what the degree would, how you earn the degree.
Yes, that is correct.
What is the length of time to get a degree?
It depends on the program they're in. Most of them are the basic baccalaureate degree, and that's a 4-year degree.
Senator McCormick.
Thanks. We were hearing from the state colleges and from UVM recently about excess architecture, buildings that are no longer being used, and what to do with them as student populations shrink and enrollment trends. Why not? Do you not have any buildings that could be repurposed?
I'm probably not the best person to speak to that. I can tell you that I am not aware that the university has any usable excess architecture. Right now, we are begging for classroom space.
Okay,
I can answer that if you'd like, Senator McCormick.
Okay.
can you identify yourself for the record?
Sure, I'm Wendy Koenig, I'm the Director of Government Relations for UVM. At this time, we are fully enrolled and we do not have a shrinking student population. So I think that we have some buildings that have seen the end of their life's use in residence halls and in some buildings that we use for staff. Some of those buildings will have to be replaced, but space is a premium at UVM at the moment.
But you're selling buildings.
We are not selling them.
State college.
She's UVM.
I know it's UVM.
State colleges are the ones that are selling.
I know, we heard from both.
No, we're not selling any buildings.
She would know. Okay. Other questions? Rosemary, thank you very much for coming.
So welcome. If you have any follow-up questions, I'm really easy to find at UVM.
Okay, so the last question is, where exactly did you take that picture from behind you?
Right in front of Waterman.
Oh, good. All right, well, I hope it looks that way in the not too distant future.
I do too.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Catherine Levasseur, Director of External and Government Affairs with the state colleges. Hi, you wanted to come up to the witness chair?
Would it be okay with you? Dr. Lisa Fox from Vermont Tech is here with me, and I think it might be helpful for the committee to hear from her first.
All right.
And I would be happy to fill in anything from the system perspective that might be helpful to hear.
That would be perfectly fine by me, and you are welcome to take the prime witness chair if you'd like. But Lisa, welcome to the Senate Institutions Committee. And I think you were on earlier when I explained just a brief biography of who you are and how you fit into the picture would be very helpful.
Great. Well, thank you, senators, for inviting me into committee today. I appreciate your time and your desire to support the nursing education in Vermont. As stated, I'm Lisa Fox. I'm the Associate Dean of Nursing at Vermont Technical College. With us, along with Castleton University, house the nursing programs that are part of the Vermont State College system, soon to be Vermont State University. I'm hoping to give just a very brief overview of our program and a little bit about how simulation is important to us and nursing education in Vermont. Just to give you a brief overview of Vermont Tech and Castleton, the Vermont State College system, we have 5 nursing programs. So we have a licensed practical nursing program, which graduates approximately 150 nurses a year. We have an associate's degree in nursing, which graduates approximately 150 nurses a year. The First one was LPNs, these are RNs. Castleton has a Bachelor's of Science in Nursing, which is a 4-year degree, which graduates approximately 50 nurses a year. And we also have an RN to BSN online program that's a post-licensure program that takes associate's degree nurses and gets them a Bachelor's in Science in Nursing. And we graduate about 40 of those a year. Castleton also just started a Master's of Science in Nursing program this past fall, so we haven't graduated our first cohort there yet. And with Vermont Tech, we actually cover the entire state of Vermont. So we're covering all the way from Newport down to Bennington and Brattleboro. We have about 15 different sites across the state where we have students who do class and clinical in the areas where they live. For example, Newport, Johnson, Morrisville, Linden, White River Junction, St. Albans, Williston, Middlebury, Rutland, Bennington, Castleton, Barry, Randolph, and Brattleboro. We also have 3 sites in New Hampshire currently at Dartmouth, Hitchcock, Littleton, and Keene. We bring all of the nursing school and program to the students so they can stay where they live. All of our students are Vermonters, or most of them are Vermonters. They already live in the state and they stay in the state after graduation. Approximately 90% of our graduates stay and work in Vermont after they complete nursing school. All of our programs, like Rosemary said, we're high in demand. We have more applications than we can actually fit in a year. We get about 100 extra applications each year for our nursing programs. All of our graduates are hired into new positions long before graduation. It's high demand positions. We're fully enrolled, but with the need for nursing in Vermont, we're going to, in the next 10 years, we're going to be short 5,000 nurses, maybe even before that. We need to grow our nursing workforce in Vermont. And unfortunately, we don't have the capacity and space to be able to manage all of the needs of expanding a nursing program. Part of this is due to clinical placement. As Rosemary said, clinical placement availability, we're all over the state. And we're not just at the bigger hospitals. We're at a lot of those critical access hospitals that are pretty small. They have one med-surg unit of 20 to 25 patients. And to try to get all of the mandated clinical hours for our students in those areas and increase the numbers of students, we need to rely on simulation to help supplement those clinical experiences for our students. Our students going into some of these areas, and even in the bigger hospitals, we have limited access to the specialty areas like maternity and pediatrics and psych. And those are experiences that our students need in order to meet the objectives and to be able to graduate from nursing school. We can utilize simulation in a lot of those areas to supplement that learning for the students so that they can get experience to those situations. They can practice them. Our teachers can help walk them through them, and it makes them much safer, more knowledgeable, and it increases patient outcomes once they graduate. So I did hear one question. Oh, I'm sorry. Do you want to?
Senator Ingalls has a question.
Senator
Maz has a question.
Do you have a breakdown of the 4 million, how it would be spent?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you very well.
You have a breakdown of the 4 million, how it would be spent. If you were fortunate enough to get the 4 million, do you have a breakdown? Is there a sheet out somewhere exactly how it would be spent?
Yes, so we are currently the college that's building the site in Linden. So we are going through that process right now of building from the ground up. So we have our budget already prepared that we had. It's an EDA grant that we received for that. And so we do have the budget line item by line item for that, for how much it costs for a total build. We also have a budget planned out for a build, say, if we didn't necessarily need an actual building, but we just needed to build the inside up to equipment. We have that completely budgeted out as well. And I'm more than happy to forward those budgets to you if you would like that, to see the numbers for both of those situations. We have, we are in the process of building that one Linden site because we were able to receive a grant there with some of our funds contributing and a couple other grants that we were allowed to get. But because of our expansive nature in the state, Linden is kind of far for all of our students to travel. If we have students in Bennington and Brattleboro, it's a long distance to ask them to travel to come to one central simulation center. So, our goal was to be able to outfit, some centralized simulation centers around the state so that sites that are close to one another can share. One example would be, we're joining with Castleton University to become the Vermont State University, and our nursing program, we're in discussions right now on making a combined simulation center between Castleton and us that would service all of our Rutland area and the Castleton area, and our Middlebury folks as well, probably, but it'll kind of serve in that region and would be able to, serve probably 60 to 80 students by the time it's completed. And so we haven't chosen where we could do that, but that's the kind of thing that we're looking to do, to try and, make these centers so that we can utilize more than one nursing level, more than one nursing program, so that we can get as many students in there and utilize the resources that we're able to get. At Vermont Tech, we also have dental hygiene, we have respiratory therapy, paramedicine, and radiography as our health sciences, and they all utilize our simulation centers as well for their learning. So it's not just with nursing, but it's also combined with our health sciences, trying to get those professions out there that are also in critical shortage.
Lisa, were you present at the press conference at Linden with Senators Leahy and Sanders and Congressman Welch and the CEO of Northeastern Vermont Regional Hospital several months ago?
Unfortunately, I was not. I actually just came into this position as of January 3rd. So our previous associate dean was present at that press conference.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you and Catherine. You've described yourselves as being fully enrolled. To me, that signifies either A, you have decided there's a cutoff point for your potential student population. B, you do not have adequate space. C, you don't have adequate faculty. Or a combination of those three things has led you to the conclusion that you are presently fully enrolled. Am I wrong? Is there another category? But can you tell me your own priorities? What is it you feel you need to expand the program if there is that much of a need?
Yeah, it would be E, all of the above, for all of those reasons. We have put caps on our program because of the limitations in clinical site availability. We do have faculty shortages that limit that as well, and space considerations for our students. But one of the biggest things in limiting programs is clinical availability, and I'm sure Rosemary would concur with this as well. Is if we can't get our students those experiences and get them into clinical, then it doesn't matter how many faculty we hire. We have no place to put them. So, we need to have ways that we can get students that experience, and simulation is an evidence-based way for students to get clinical hands-on experience that's similar to what they may get in a clinical setting. It's not the same, but it is something that has been, researched, and the nursing community and all of our accreditors and the licensing boards have, agreed that it is an approved method for allowing students to get some of those clinical hours and that hands-on experience. it also allows for a safe learning environment for those difficult situations or situations that students may not encounter in the hospital. As Rosemary said, we can send a student to labor and delivery, but if nobody comes in with a birth, the student is missing. They're standing there for 20 hours and nothing happens. Whereas we could bring them into the simulation lab, and in 8 hours they could experience 3 births with our birthing mannequin, and we can walk them through the entire process. There's a lot of opportunity and necessity for these simulations in nursing education. And in order to expand our programs and add more students, we need to be able to have these hours to be able to get our students in there. And in a shorter amount of time, we can get them those experiences rather than tying up, 20 hours on a floor where they stand around.
You said it beautifully.
Yeah. Okay.
I think I agree with Dr. Fox. I've never done multiple choice questions, so I would go with E, all of the above. It's a multifaceted issue for us. It's faculty availability of master's prepared and above prepared faculty. It is space. There are so Dr. Fox mentioned we have 15 locations around the state. In some of those locations, our skills lab, where they learn how to do feeding pumps or IVs, that's the same space as the classroom, and it might be a room this big. And so they've got the lab space and the classroom space, and they're trying to do both in one spot. They are fire code and capacity code limited by the number of students that can come through that space on a daily basis. There was a question about the allocation of the funds. We've identified, I think it's around 8 sites, Lisa, around the state that we're pretty prime for expansion. These are sites that either we see more interest than we can accommodate in the student spaces, or they are sites that we physically have the space to expand. We've identified several sites around the state that we can grow the program. Linden is a prime example, with a couple of tweaks to classroom capacity with the addition of a simulation lab. We're primed to grow that by 30 practical nursing and 30 AVAT seats in the next several years. As I believe Rosemary mentioned, we are also facing some construction challenges, as is everybody else right now with the construction cycle. And so that project is a little bit behind schedule, but we have locations that are ready to expand, and we have the students who are at the door and waiting to enroll.
So I'm only concentrating on Linden because I was there for this press conference, but if I understood it correctly, the money that was being brought in by our federal delegation is actually going towards this project. And you are on the trail, so to speak, of getting that project completed?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. I need to pause here and turn to Eric Philcorn because I want to make sure I'm not speaking out of turn. Eric works for BGS, but traditionally the capital bill covers brick and mortar, not necessarily equipment. Am I safe in saying that, or is there some, I'm hearing something labeled clinical, I forgot what the other word was, but I'm assuming that means using these high-tech simulators. And I don't know that we've ever covered in the capital bill entities or items like that.
There, Eric Philcorn, Principal Assistant BGS. In the strictest sense, from what I've heard from the Treasurer's Office, it's a thing that has a 20-year lifespan or better, because we're basically borrowing money for 20 years to pay for the thing. So in the strictest sense, it is bricks and mortar. Sometimes, for instance, we're building the new physically secure residential facility up in Essex that includes cabinetry and it's all built stuff. There were past appropriations for things like the IT system that the courts are using now, and that was questionable at the time. And in fact, many people said that's the last time we're going to do a major IT deployment using capital dollars. And in fact, 2 years ago, there was the integrated eligibility platform for AHS, which was capital one year, but they moved it to general fund the next year because the rules are tightening. Or, I mean, I think the rules remain the same, but the enforcement is tightening around what is really capital.
Okay.
Is that helpful?
Yes, thank
Yeah,
you.
it's great.
The simulators, what's the life expectancy?
Well, I think it depends on the simulator that's purchased. We do currently have some simulators that are approaching 15 years that we are still utilizing. I don't know, how long they will last, but they, the new ones that are coming out, obviously these were purchased 15 years ago, and the technology has definitely gotten much better throughout the last 15 years. So, I think, and I'm sure Rosemary can think about when her simulators are around, but if the ones that we have currently can last 15 years, the new ones coming out, I'm sure can last 20 years, maybe up to that. I mean, I know that we utilize them a lot, and, we maintain all of the maintenance and try to keep them as good as possible. But I can't guarantee that that's how long they would last. But I can say, not just with simulators themselves, but even with the build out of the simulation centers, even if we're not building a brick and mortar building, there's a lot of construction that goes into the inside of those rooms. And I do have some photos that I'd love to either show you, or I can forward to you that can show you what that looks like. Because, we have to build out a control room and a separate space for the actual simulators that includes double-sided mirrors and cabinetry. And, we're building it out just like an actual hospital room. So there's a lot of construction within the space that happens. There's a lot of audiovisual, there is audiovisual equipment, which you said was questionable, but, we do have a lot of actual, sinks and different types of cabinetry and storage things, and different types of medical wall boards and things like that. And I can say all of those equipment that we have on the walls, we have well over 20 years we've had them. So, a lot of the equipment would last that long.
Do you have a couple of photos that you can throw up on the screen?
I do. Can I share my screen?
We can have Alex share the screen.
I've already given you permission, you can share.
Okay, perfect. So can you see this?
Yes.
Yeah, so this is our control room looking into one of the simulation labs. This is one of our simulation labs. So you can see there's a lot of cabinetry behind. There's beds that definitely last longer than we've had those for a long time. Our wall boards behind, we have computer monitors set up with the patients. Let's see. So here's the inside of the simulation lab. Like I said, we have, double way mirrors here. There's a lot of construction that happens around the room. Floor space, everything has to be set out just the right way.
Is this in Vermont?
This is at VTC in Williston.
Okay.
This is actually one of our newer simulation labs that we built, but I will say this one was built probably 10 years ago. So this stuff is all 10 years old, believe it or not. So it does last a long time. This is our birthing mannequin, actually, that we have that delivers and gives birth. You can see we can actually simulate a live birth there, so students can see those things that they necessarily wouldn't be able to. And we do have, the ability to debrief and look at things. I'm trying to think of what else is on here. And then, we have like newborn assessment and things like that. So I probably have hundreds of these. I can always send you a lot
Well, no,
more.
these are good because they give us a flavor of what you're trying to accomplish here. I'm
Right,
still
and I
gonna
don't-
come back to my original suggestion, though, if you took politicians instead of the mannequins, politicians we know last forever, so you wouldn't have to worry about life expectancy.
So some of
Well,
those
we-
actors know better than I do, so.
Yeah, that's true.
And I'm sure Rosemary can say this as well, but we do some, we call them standardized patients in some live simulations with actual people sitting in the beds where we still utilize the same space, but for some of those. So if anyone wants to volunteer, come on down, we'd be more than happy to have you come in and play a patient if you want to get the full experience.
Great. Thank you.
I would just toss one new piece out. We're working now with engineering a little bit, and I've mentioned this to Lisa, is we're trying to look at virtual reality as an aid. So perhaps in the future, simulation labs will look very different. Not in the immediate future, not tomorrow, probably not in 3 years, but maybe in 5 years. And I use the analogy of a library. We used to think a library was where you stacked books, and that certainly isn't the use of the library anymore. And I'm wondering down the road here, as we study it more and we work with our colleagues in other disciplines, if we don't find that simulation labs are going to look entirely different. For right now, we need what we've got, but we are working scientifically with other disciplines to try and bring ourselves into a more sophisticated future.
Well, our legislature's been working in virtual reality for about 2 years now. We don't recommend it. Senator McCormick, I think you had your hand.
Yeah. The allocation you're looking for is to, first of all, do you need new mannequins or more mannequins? You need to replace mannequins, or you need to have more?
I mean, that for us, that would be part of it if we could get funding for that. Because we are going to be pushing the 20-year mark soon. And if we want to give students the best experience, we do need to have things, mannequins that we can find parts to replace and those sort of things as well. That is important. At some point, we're not going to be able to fix the ones we have. And we are getting close to that with some of them not, but in certain locations that have been around for a long time, we do have some simulators that we can't get replacement parts, and they won't service any longer because they are so old. When we're pushing that 15 to 20-year mark, the manufacturers just start making better things and stop, wanting to upgrade the old ones.
And you're trying to expand, so you need more space. Do you need more buildings, or can you repurpose buildings you already have?
In the short term, we can repurpose. We can jerry rig in the short term, not the long term.
Oh, and I think for us at VTC, we always look to see what we can repurpose first. We always look to see if there's a space that we can build out the inside to make it look like that with the different rooms and all of that stuff. And most places in the state, we can do that. Linden was one where we couldn't. So we needed to, start from scratch just because of the space needs for that center. And there are probably a couple other places in the state that we would have to do that as well, because we're not near a campus in a lot of our places. We're utilizing either CCV space, or we're utilizing, some leased room at, wherever there's an office building or something like that. So we may need to, in some places, we may need to build something, but we always try to, do what we can with the space that we have first.
Okay, I am mindful of the time here. Devin Green, I have not forgotten about you. Welcome to Senate Institutions.
Thank you for having me. Devin Green from the Vermont Association of Hospitals and Health Systems. And I just wanted to comment a little bit on the process and the need and lend my support for this proposal. First off, in terms of the need, I just want to make sure that people understand the direness of the current workforce crisis. Right now, there are 103 Vermonters who are in hospitals, in hospital beds. They're ready to be released, but there's no place for them to go because our long-term care facilities are understaffed because they don't have nurses. So they're understaffed. Our hospitals are also understaffed. We don't have enough nurses. We're paying travel nurses 2 to 3 times more than we would budget for to take care of people who don't need to be in the hospital. That goes directly to Vermonters' pockets. That also goes directly to our emergency departments. Our emergency departments have had difficulty placing people because there are patients taking up hospital beds who don't need to be in the hospital. So I do want to emphasize, I can't emphasize enough the need to do something now to support the nurse workforce of the future. So this all comes as part of a package. You heard the schools talking about how it's, it's choice E, everything. And so we can hire more faculty in our higher education, but if we don't have the training facilities for them to train students, then we're not going to increase that output of nurses. And so we really support the idea of this money going to fund simulation labs. I met with all the chief nursing officers. It was one of their suggestions. One thing it can also help with is with clinical faculty and nurse preceptors right now, we are short on staff. And so it helps with our staff shortages if we know that the future nurses are getting trained in the simulation labs. And as the schools were saying, there are states that have 2 hours of clinical work being equal to 1 hour of simulation lab work. So there's a direct ratio there that increases the speed of training. So we could not support this initiative enough. We think that in the end, it's going to save money in the healthcare system and save lives by giving people the care they need.
Committee, any questions for Debbie?
Was that supposed to be a comment for committee after, I guess?
Well, we have to talk about the entire project and the budget that comes along with it. Just for all of your edification, as you may know, the institutions committees come every year with a pot of money that they have to decide how to spend it in what capacity for each entity that comes essentially looking for money. One of the concerns of the committee, I guess, is going to have to be, as always, when somebody comes with a presentation, we don't have a whole lot of money in a bank that we can just simply dole out to anybody at any time. We have a limited pot to work with. And so what we try to look at is, when is some project going to be shovel ready? And how do we try to adjust each year to accommodate that shovel constantly moving through the ground? Some of the things we've talked about here today have to do with planning. So we know as a committee that there are things that have to happen by way of red tape that will automatically spill your project over into a following year. And so we get another pot of money in the following year. And when do we give you the money? Do we give it up front all at once? Do we try to parse it out according to the schedule of events that you have to accommodate? That's one of our major conversations at the end of the year when we try to figure out to do what we can for everybody who is asking. So I don't think there's anybody on the committee that does not recognize the urgent need for this to happen. The question is whether or not we can accommodate you this year. And if for whatever reason you don't get all or some of what you wanted, there is always next year to come back. And I would highly recommend you do that anyway, because I'm sure you're going to have other ongoing projects. But part of our conversation is to figure out, okay, who is everybody on the list? Who is asking for what stage in the project are they all at? And how can we best help everybody in a way that makes sense for the limited amount of money that we have? You all are very familiar with that process, I'm sure. In each of your respective campuses, you have the exact same thing you talk about, and so do we. But I don't want you to be discouraged by any of the questions you've been hearing here today. That's part of our process. So thank you very much for coming along. I've got to move on to the next subject. Hopefully we'll see you again.
Thank you.
Enjoy spring. Committee, we are going to move on to our military request.
Hey, can you comment on the last segment? Can I just throw a couple comments out there that I want
Real quick.
I just don't know about how much of what they were asking for is capital improvement.
We do have to have that conversation.
Okay.
So welcome, everybody. I've got Jacob Roy, Michael Blow, and John Patry.
We brought a couple other reinforcements too.
Well, you can invite them in, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
I
7,
can take
8,
a walk at
9,
the space.
10. When you say you brought other reinforcements, are they on the screen? or are they out in the room? Oh, yes, you are, we're all set then, okay.
Good afternoon.
Whether we.
Keith, take the front
You're
seat.
Jacob. I'm assuming you're Jacob.
Oh,
No, I'm John Major.
John,
Keith,
Yeah, Keith, take the front seat, will you? There you go.
and there are folding chairs right behind that filing cabinet if you guys want to come up together.
That's great.
All right, so you are,
Sir, I'm Major Keith Schnell. I work for Colonel Roy as the Plans and Programs Manager, of the military department.
great. Let me start this conversation off by saying we are on YouTube Live. I have no idea who's out there in the audience, but I try to be accommodating and make sure that even if we have a 4th grade class, for instance, watching us, that they all understand the language we're talking. So you may waltz off into a vernacular that you very well understand, we may understand, but if it red flags for me that somebody out there in YouTube world may not, I may interrupt your testimony, not to be rude, but just to try to bring us up to speed and ask you directly what's X, Y, or Z mean. The first thing we ask you to do is identify yourself for the record, give us a brief biography of who you are, and then launch into why you are here.
Yes, sir. So, as I say, my boss, Colonel Roy, is here to give primary testimony. But my name is Major Keith Schnell. I'm the Plans and Programs Manager for the Vermont Army National Guard. So I develop and execute long-range construction plans and also serve as a project manager for some of the larger military construction and maintenance projects that we execute with both state and federal funds. We are here to offer testimony and discuss requests for additional state funds to meet a federal matching requirement for a number of high priority projects that have already been funded by the federal government. But where we've had various cost overruns due to COVID that have impacted our ability to actually execute that. So, sir, would you like to
introductions.
Yeah. So for everybody, my name is Lieutenant Colonel Jacob Roy. I am the Construction and Facility Management Officer for the state of Vermont in the Army National Guard. So I work directly for General Knight and ensuring that he has the adequate facilities, training areas, and so forth ready for his forces to train and deploy in support of either the state or the federal government. So as we'll get into this kind of going forward, that will show on what we're testifying today. We have a number of shovel-ready projects that, as Major Schnell has said, has seen some significant cost overruns because of COVID. We're seeing like over double, if not triple, the costs of things that are related to buildings. So, but we'll get into that more a little bit later. I also am dual hatted. I actually am in the on the MDay side of it. Currently, I'm with the 86 Infantry Brigade Combat Team as their rear deck commander. Those are the folks that just came back from Africa, the Middle East, and Kosovo. So, Mike, I'll turn it over to you to introduce yourself.
Yeah, good afternoon. This is Mike Blow. I'm the currently the deputy CFMO, and I'm also the resource manager for the Vermont Construction and Facilities Management Office. Kim?
Hi there, I'm Kim Fidelli. I'm this financial manager for the state military department. So I'm overseeing the state budgets and helping these guys to execute their projects.
John Patry, military department operations manager. Also facilitate with executing the projects that are necessary for keeping the National Guard trained.
And your niece, Willie Jane, is the prosecutor who was in my last trial.
Okay.
Welcome to Senate Institutions. Committee, for the purpose of our discussion, it's section 11 on the spreadsheet, if you want to look at the numbers. That's why I'm thinking, I'm hearing cost overruns, and I'm wondering that the amount of money that the House generated for you, are we talking about something in addition to that now, or what is the, if I can be direct, the original recommendation was for, let's see,
900,000, right?
900,000 in 22, 1,123,000. It looks like the House came along, gave you an additional 200. Are you now talking about something in excess of that by way of cost overruns?
That is correct, sir, yes.
Can we hear what that need is?
I'd be glad to, sir.
Go ahead.
Sir, our gentleman, so to direct your attention to the document that we passed out with
this page right here.
That one right there, yes. We're focusing really on, so we just orient you to this. So the column that is in blue, labeled FY22 appropriation request, represents items that we actually expended funds on in state fiscal year 22. So for instance, modern construction addition upgrades for the Westminster Armory, roof replacement, Westminster Armory, and so forth. That was a portion of the $900,000 budget appropriated for FY22. The next column is FY23 appropriation request, and at the bottom of that column, you can see the $900,000 plus $200,000. The items in the FY23 column, the 234, 725, 560, 555 numbers for construction upgrades to Bradford and Newport armories. Those 4 items are what we're talking about here. Much of the rest of this document outlines our longer term budget picture and some large projects that we anticipate in out years, but are not as pertinent to this fiscal year's discussion. When we initially asked for, so to summarize these 2 sets of projects, these 4 line items here, 1A, 1B, 2A, and 2B, these are shovel-ready projects for which we've already received a significant federal match. So that's that Fed share column that you see there. These are 1.665 million, 725,560,000. That's federal money that we've already received and are prepared to expend, provided we meet the statutory state match. Unfortunately, and I say this as a project manager, the cost for all things construction related in the past year to 18 months have escalated dramatically versus even what our professional architect and engineering firms that we have on retainer estimated. To give one example, the roof replacement on the Bradford Armory, which is a component of one of these, we originally estimated it would be approximately $220,000 based on doing near identical roof replacements on a number of other armories. We got 2 bids back from Vermont construction firms, and they were both over $500,000. Now that is the largest increase we've seen, but at no point have we put something out to bid in the last year and had it not come in more than 50% over what our best professional judgment going into a hit ban. So when we asked for, we asked for $200,000, I believe, back in September. And that was our best judgment at the time, based on, what we thought things were going to cost with a reasonable, or I should say, typical cost escalation. But as we got into federal fiscal year 22 and started trying to expend these federal funds that we received, the numbers were coming back just much higher than we had anticipated. The upshot being that for the Bradford Armory projects, by rolling over some of the state fiscal 22 funds to 23, we will be able to execute or to provide the state match for the addition to the Bradford Armory, but will not, with current funds, be able to do the renovation and roof placement for Bradford or either of the projects for Newport. And just in terms of longer term consequences, that will mean that while we have received the federal funding for the Newport Armory, we won't necessarily be able to execute that either this year or in a future year. Sir, have I overlooked anything that you'd like to highlight?
No, I mean, really to kind of, gentlemen, to summarize things up, if you look at the number on the bottom line, we're about $900,000 off from being able to execute what we're looking at for the remainder of this fiscal year and for next fiscal year. That really is what comes down to it. That's the short and sweet version. As Major Schnell said, we bid busted on 2 projects already. My federal funds will be able to hold out until September of this year, which means that anything that I can roll over in capital to the state FY 23 year, we will do that. But it's not going to be enough to get us to where we need to match the federal dollars that I currently have on hand. I know we're not talking my typical building maintenance budget at this point, but that one, we're seeing the same thing across the board, with everything that has just gone through the roof on costs. We have pretty much busted our every bid that we have seen up to this point so far. So that is pretty much it in a nutshell, gentlemen.
Senator Ringles has a question.
So, not always want to assume, but I know that you guys are never flush with money. It's just the way it is. You've got a lot of expensive real estate and territory that you have to maintain. And historically, and maybe you haven't been, but historically, what have you been underfunded per year? Or are you usually right about where you want to be?
Sir, how would you?
Typically underfunded.
Sir, I would dare say we're probably, based on an $18 million federal budget, at least a 25% match to that federal budget is where we should be. So that, yes, that we have been underfunded up significantly up to this point.
So let me ask you a different way. I apologize. So this year, your $900,000 would make you whole as far as to get the project through. Is that typically something that you wouldn't have to ask for in previous years? Additional money to get you through to make you whole again?
That would make it this year, if I can interject. But then if you go to look at column 24 for FY 24, the stack of projects for that year is $5 million in that single year, and then almost 2.2 the next year. So 900,000 is generally, maybe you can even say 50% short of what we have that could be done and should be done in our planning. So
Sir,
we usually have to move those to the right, in the years. Go ahead, Mike. Sorry.
So we typically do as much as we can with the state contribution, which means that every year our facilities are degraded because we can't do everything that we really need to. our program shows we could probably use 2 million to 4 million in capital construction each year. And that also means that, the building maintenance ratio would have to increase significantly too, just to keep these buildings sustained.
It's happening all over now with the cost of increasing. Right. Contracting, everybody's bidding for whether it's paving or construction, everything is 40% different than it was a year ago.
Yes.
We had a paving project come in the other day that was 66% above.
66%.
66% above what the estimated cost would be.
So I can say, gentlemen, that one of the things that we're trying to do is identify some of these buildings that were built in the 1950s. Well, actually, I have 2 in the inventory right now that were built in, the 1910s, time frame, that decade. When we're dealing with those types of buildings, and even ones that were built in the 1950s, we're extremely limited, especially trying to meet the current, energy requirements for buildings, how we modify the buildings, what we can put into them. They just the technology used way back when is completely obsolete, and we're having a very difficult time trying to match current technologies and current requirements to our aged buildings. This is one of the problems. The roof infrastructures and things like that is, it's really trying to figure out how to get the tires off from a Mercedes to fit them on a Yugo. If that's a way to kind of look at it with some of these older buildings. But one thing I would like to point out though, and this is probably going to be some sticker shock going forward, but we have proposed to the Adjutant General that we look at modernizing to one facility and go to a regional armory concept, which means potentially removing some of our oldest buildings out of the inventory. Luckily, Bennington is going to be done this year, so that's a 1914 building that's getting a brand new modernized building next year. So, and doing more things like that. The next biggest one on the docket would be St. Albans, which is, I believe, a 1916 era building. As well as the Swanton Armory, and looking at one great big armory. Those 2 buildings, Swanton and St. Albans, sad to say, suck up a lot of resources, and it's just because of their age. Their infrastructure just is not collaborative with current technologies. So we're hoping that in the long-term grand scheme of things, we can replace 2 buildings with 1. It's going to require a significant state investment, upwards of probably close to $8+ million to do this. But in the long run, it should alleviate a significant burden on sustainment and maintenance going forward, because it's going to be a 20, late 2020s, 2030 type building.
What's the overall status of your personnel numbers?
John?
These buildings are all being used to house individuals, and I'm just curious as to what the workforce.
For the guard training, yeah.
Well, for the guard, the Army Guard is well into the 2000s, for end strength. Our largest formation with the 86th Brigade is predominantly spread across the state. That they actually house almost every armory that's around in the state. I want to say the smallest, well, by requirement, in order for me to put federal dollars into it, each facility has to have a minimum of 55 people in it. So if you use that, at least every armory's got 55 personnel that are in that and drill out of that facility. Does that answer your question, sir?
Yes, thank you.
I'd also like to add that overall, our federal excuse me, our federal requirement, the criteria that we use to construct facilities, for instance, armories, or we call them readiness centers now. The state of Vermont is short over 400,000 square feet of armory space to meet its mission by requirements. So looking at what we're doing for a couple of these projects that were for this year, we had one aligned with state fiscal year capital construction dollars to be funded with one type of money. The federal fiscal year 22. And then we were going to use the federal fiscal year 23 to fund the next one. Is that how it worked, Jacob? Or did I get that messed up? But it's looking forward. It's the plan to build a larger super facility, consolidate people, and then that building is going to be much less to maintain for the next 20 years because it's going to be all high efficiency stuff.
If you look on the bottom of the spreadsheet, those numbers, the requirements necessary for those, actually it's two armories in the long term. One in the northwest, which is the St. Albans Armory that is being talked about, and then the further future would be the northeast regional facility, which would plan to consolidate three armories, three of the 1950s vintage.
And those would be your bottom six, the ones labeled no comment.
Yeah, bottom six rows, yeah.
Well, kudos for doing your homework because you've covered at least three of the members on the committee by way of specific space.
Oh, there we go. I didn't do it geographically, but it does make sense though.
I will point out your problems are actually quite familiar to this committee. We have a budget of just under 124 million spread out over 2 years. So we understand where you're going. You have a limited amount of money to work with, and you have a whole lot of things to take care of. We have the same problem here. We try to do the best we can for everybody, but understand we have requests from virtually everybody on the list that is running into the exact same problem you are by way of cost overruns. I guess that's the short way of saying, I hope you guys do bake sales or something like that to try to pick up some of the slack. Any other questions, committee? Folks, I want to thank you all for coming by. We are a ways yet from having a good conversation about what to do about all this, but you've given us some information. We appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you
for your time.
Thank you. Committee, we are going to shift gears. Last item up for discussion is the overview of the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail Management. And let's see, who do we have? Amy Bell is here, Joel Perico is here, and Daniel Glabrier. I am not sure who would like to go first in that list, but let me back up the train a little bit. You all may not have been here earlier. What I try to do is get you to first introduce yourselves for the purpose of our YouTube audience and give us a little background on yourself, how you fit into the picture, and then launch into your testimony. At that point, if you should say something that may not be familiar, at least in my eyes, to our YouTube audience, which could literally be fourth graders for all we know, I may ask you to stop for a moment and explain what X, Y, or Z means. Now, who would like to go first? My list gave me, let's see, I had Michael Boomhauer.
Michelle.
Yes, Michelle Boomhauer. My apologies. And I don't see Michelle here.
We've got more witnesses joining in a second here.
Okay. I'm told we have more witnesses.
I can start then if Michelle's not available.
Dan, welcome to Senate Institutions.
Yeah, for the record, my name is Joel Perigo. I am the Municipal Assistance Program Manager. I've been serving as the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail Project Manager for quite some time now. And I've been overseeing the build-out phase that we're going to talk about today. I believe Alex was going to share our presentation, if I'm not mistaken.
I can indeed, just one moment here.
If you want us to introduce ourselves first, I think we need to go around and do that, right?
I'm not sure who's on now because I'm screen sharing and we may have to take this one person at a time. That was Dan?
Yeah.
I thought I heard the chair request that we introduce ourselves before we jumped into our presentation. I was just asking if that's what you wanted us to do.
Well, I only see 3-4 of you now on the screen. And I think what I'm going to do is walk through each person's testimony and have each person at the time of their testimony just introduce themselves. How's
Okay.
that?
All right, that's fine. I misunderstood. Sorry.
It's okay.
There's Michelle.
So Joel, did you want to take the lead on this, or how did you want to work this?
Well, I think Michelle was going to give us a kickoff now that she's shown up. So I'll let her do that, and then I can jump back on for the construction update.
Michelle, welcome to Senate Institutions.
Thank you, Chair. I am excited to be here with all of you, especially Senator Ingalls and Senator Mazza, who I missed this morning.
Yeah, no, missed you too, Michelle. You didn't miss anything, Michelle, trust me.
Yes, she did.
Yes, you did. Without Michelle, we're.
That's right, we're floundering.
I did watch the tape, so I'm all set. But
Okay.
Thanks for having us in, and we have a lot of great updates for you on our advancement of the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail, both on the construction side as well as our efforts to advance the development of a management plan for the trail, and talking about all the public outreach we've done to date, and also introducing our new program manager for all of our rail trails statewide. So a variety of things to talk about, and knowing that people are short on time today and you've been busy, we'll just take it right away, and I'm going to kick it over to Joel.
Michelle. Yes, Alex, if you could share the presentation now, that'd be great. Again, for the record, my name is Joel Pergo. I am the Municipal Assistance Program Manager for VTrans and serving as the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail Project Manager for the construction piece of it. And so maybe if we can advance, I think it's actually maybe 2 slides, Alex. Great. So this is sort of the overview of the trail. The segments in green are currently up and running as completed projects. The most northwest segment was one of the first couple segments we picked off once the capital bill funding was appropriated. The remaining segments that you see in yellow and black are the segments that are currently under 4 different contracts, one of which is a priority bridge project with JPC card. Project that is a segment of trail from Sheldon to Cambridge, another segment from Morristown to Hardwick, and then the final segment from Hardwick connecting down to West Danville. And just has a lot, this information is actually available on our website. It's outward facing to the public, gives some completion dates, the contractors, the various links of the trail segments, and the completed segments as well. So if you could move to the next slide, Alex. This is just like an overall schedule of the phases that we've completed over time. The ones again in green were the phases that were completed as part of our coordination with VAST, and the 4 remaining segments that will finish this fall of 22.
So are we anticipating completion of the trail as you've just shown it by the fall of 22?
Correct. And I think, actually, maybe if we go to the next slide, that is correct, though. Can you get us to the next slide, Alex? Yes. Sorry. Yes. So this has the contract amounts and the completion dates for the various contracts. LVRT 10, what we call LVRT 10, is the bridge project. That includes 6 different bridges throughout the different segments. And that is bridge work only. That is a $3.4 million project with a completion date of August 31st. That right now, that work, contractor has begun to pour bridge abutments at all bridge locations. The agency is continuing review of contractor submittals for the prefabricated structures. Traffic impacts are pretty limited this time to construction vehicles entering and exiting the work sites. And again, that project is on time for completion. The LVRT 11 segment is from Sheldon Junction to Cambridge, is with Dirt Tech Company. Contract amount of $2.4 million with a completion date of November 12th. That project is installing erosion control, doing some clearing and grubbing, and the culvert work for that project is scheduled to begin at the end of April. That project is currently on time to finish this fall. LVRT 12 from Morrisville to Hardwick with SD Ireland. It's a contract amount of $6.9 million with a completion date scheduled for November 10th. Similar to LVRT 11, clearing and grubbing is underway. Preliminary bridge work is underway. You'd see them working at the Fisher Covered Bridge as we speak. Culvert work is scheduled to begin on that project at the end of April as well. And we also have a prefabricated structure as part of that project that the agency is reviewing the submittals on right now. And finally, LVRT 13, which is the segment from Hardwick to West Danville, is with GW Tatro, contract amount of 2.2 and a completion date of November 12th. Clearing and grubbing is nearly complete on that segment. Trail work and small culvert construction is scheduled to begin this week. And the agency is currently reviewing review of box culverts and other submittals, preliminary submittals. And again, that project is scheduled for November 12th and is on time.
Joel, we have a question from Senator Mazza.
Joel, how did it come within the bidding process? I noticed, is it all within your range of estimates, or it seems kind of strange that everything is listed here, but were they all within the range, or are they over or under? Or?
So we had, so these projects, because they were bid sort of before this big escalation of cost, it seems, these were actually bid late summer last year into the fall and winter. So a lot of these prices were contracts that we awarded last year. And so most
they have to keep them even though they're awarded a year ago. They still have to keep that bid.
That is correct. Yep.
Wow, you were lucky, because I'm sure that would be another 20-30% higher.
So to sort of get to your question though, some of them came in high and some of them came in low. Like LVRT 12 came in a little higher than we expected. I think the 10 came in lower than we expected. And so some costs went up, some went down. But overall, we nearly hit our mark. So.
Well, that's good. Everything we hear is 40% higher this year. Just wondering how long ago.
I think it was lucky that we bid these when we did.
I guess you are. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
There's probably a few contractors out there that are not happy.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, so there is normally when we award these contracts, there is a big push for us to approve their submittals so that they can start procuring materials at that time, so that they don't see those large escalation in prices after, long after they've been awarded the project.
So what are the chances of getting those November dates moved up a little earlier so we get them before the election and not after?
Well, at this point, not so good. Those are contractual dates. So
there's a certain individual in this committee who wants to cut a ribbon.
Well, I was thinking more along about what does it cost to have a little sign advertising on it. This is brought to you by Joe Benning, candidate for Lieutenant Governor. I'm trying to inject humor into this afternoon's committee meeting here. Joel, we cut you off there. Were you continuing?
I'm all set on this slide, so we can go to the next. So there's an additional sign plan that will follow after the construction that was not scheduled as part of the original plan here. And this is just a slide that says what that additional sign plan is. Think of it as geographical information available to both the user of the trail as well as potential users, people that are on the highway trying to find the trail, trying to find places to park, things like that. example that I've given in the past is when you're driving through the national parks, you'll see the brown destination signs that show camping and parking areas. You may see some of those that come out of this, as well as like town line signs along the trail, and other geographic destinations, mile markers, letting people know how far they got to get to, the town of St. Johnsbury, things like that. So we're working with the RPCs, VASTs, as well as other stakeholders to solicit the information, looking at best practices from other large trails across the country. We actually just got to the point now where we have that sort of summary of all of the signs that are intended to go on the trail, and that is currently under review at the agency. And actually, if you go to the next slide, so this is what it's not. It's not temporary traffic control during construction. It's not signs for individual businesses, services, or attractions. That's later on, sort of phase 2, that I think Jackie might touch on. And it's not interpretive signage, except I think there's maybe one minor interpretive signage included for the Fisher Covered Bridge, if I'm remembering correctly. And the next slide is the timeline for this, which is pretty basic at this point. We're going through the development of plans and specs throughout this year, with bids scheduled for this winter, and the signs will be installed next year. It's a pretty non-intrusive type construction activity, though. The trails will remain open. You just may see some various contractors installing signs on the trail itself. And I think that's all I have.
Senator Ingalls has a question.
Joel, maybe I jumped ahead on a slide too much. The next one was the LVRT management plan. Is somebody else going to cover that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I'll wait. That's where my question is.
All right. Thank you.
I had Amy Bell next on my schedule. And I
Good
can't
afternoon,
see-
Senators.
Good afternoon.
Really glad. Alex, if you could advance the slide one, that would be great. My name's Amy Bell, and I'm a policy and planning manager here at VTrans. I work in the policy planning and intermodal development division, and I'm the one who is overseeing the consultant and the development of the management plan. So I will be speaking specific to the management plan today. Next slide, please. So we started the LVRT management plan, I think it was in the fall, and why are we embarking on this effort? We've got the trail completion in the fall of this year, the construction components of it. We have an existing VAST management plan that was adopted back in 2016, and it was strictly from VAST perspective. And obviously VTrans has a slightly different take on the whole management of the facility. And as you all know, VTrans is taking over management from VAST on July 1st of this year. So we really felt it was important that we develop a management plan to address how are we going to go about managing this incredible resource that we have, and we'll be taking responsibility for. So management plan, we wanted to just kind of describe an overall cohesive vision for the completed trail. Right now it's been done in segments. It's a little bit disjointed in places, but just kind of creating an overall vision to ensure some continuity along the entire 93-mile corridor we felt was really important. Also, just the long-term strategies for management, maintenance, and operations. It's a very long, diverse corridor. It goes through 18 communities and 5 counties. And there's a lot of different entities and a lot of different issues along that corridor. So we really felt it was important to take the time to develop some real concrete steps as to how we were going to manage, maintain, and operate it. And then one of the really important aspects of this trail is supporting opportunities for community economic development efforts along the entire corridor. So that's another thing that you'll hear in the context of the LVRT management plan. And then the other thing is that effective on July 1, we're also taking over management responsibility for a series of other rail trails in the state. And so we've got about 149 miles, I'm told. In addition, that was LVRT being 93 of that, 149 that we're taking management responsibility for. So LVRT is the first management plan we're developing, and the intention is that will develop similar management plans for the other corridors, that being the Missisquoi Valley Rail Trail, the BB Spur, and the Delaware and Hudson Rail Trails. Next slide, please.
Senator Ingalls has a question.
Yeah, before we move on to that, Amy, VAST and the state and the rail trail have had a great relationship. And with you taking over management from VAST, does VAST have anything to worry about as far as your use of that trail or anything? Is that, I guess, still going to be a good partnership that we can count on?
Dan, do you want to address this? Or Jackie? I'll leave it up to you.
I think VAST has put in $3.5 million into the trail at some point in time. I think I'm pulling that figure up correctly. So I hope that we have that relationship will continue in a good way.
Yeah, this is Dan, Dan DeLabriere. I will be talking about that, Senator Ingalls, when it gets to me. But yes, no problem with VAST continuing to use it.
Okay, thank you.
Just for the committee's sake and for our witnesses' sake, Amy, when you're done, we're going to take a 5-minute break and then come back.
Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. So where are we at? This is the timeline for the entire management plan. As I mentioned, we started back in November of last year, and you can see the dashed line where we are today. We've completed a good part of our public outreach efforts, and we still have some left, but we've done a lot of our outreach to the various geographic areas and interest groups. And now we're kind of getting into the point where we're starting to talk about the recommendations and implementation plan. This is sort of where the rubber meets the road. But and you can see our intended timeline, and we still appear to be on task and on time, is the end of June for the completion of the management plan. Next slide, please. So as far as public input is concerned, a lot of people have said to us, what have you done to do outreach? So we've had we've had public, what are called hybrid meetings. There are 3 of those scheduled. We've held 2 of them, one in Hyde Park back in January, and then just on March 29th, we were in St. Johnsbury. And then we have another one in April, and it will be held over in Franklin County. And then we've held stakeholder group interviews. We've had 5 different stakeholder groups. We've done both geographic based, so one in each of the 4 regions, 3 regions, excuse me, that it covers. And then we did some focus groups with specific groups. For example, we did a one with the outdoor recreation industry to talk to them about how did they, envision the trail being used in the future from their perspective. Then we have a stakeholders committee that's been overseeing the entire development of this plan, and we've met. We've got 4 meetings we've completed 2 of the 4 meetings thus far. And then we've had a series of very robust website and what's called a crowdsource input tool, where people from the public can actually go in and on a map place a point and make a comment about a feature, about a concern. A great example is in Hyde Park. There's a group that's been working on knotweed mitigation. And so we've got lots of little dots in Hyde Park about the various outcroppings of knotweed along the trail. So next slide, please. I talked about the stakeholder interviews, and this is kind of the groups that we have done thus far. And this is just an example on the right is some of the materials that they went over during the stakeholder interviews. I think the most important thing to highlight on this is, we talk about public outreach and we try to quantify how many people are reaching, but this hybrid format that we've chosen has worked really well because we can actually quantify how many people have been participating. So thus far, we've had 200 total participants between all of our public meetings and these stakeholder sessions and our stakeholder committee that's guiding the effort. And those folks have represented all walks of life, backgrounds, industries, chambers of commerce, economic development entities, regional planning commissions, GeoQ Public. We've got some outdoor outfitters. We've got bike and ped advocacy groups, everything you can possibly imagine. Anyone who's interested in this trail has had an opportunity to participate and will continue to. And overall, we received just over 300 comments from those collectively from all of those different interest groups. And those comments are still coming in, and I anticipate we'll have more as we progress. But I think it's been we've gotten really good response from the public on this. And I'll have to be honest, the majority of comments are of a very positive perspective, and that really tells you how many people really support and are really looking forward to this trail being completed. So next slide, please. So I mentioned the crowdsource input tool. Here's the map that actually shows up on the website, and you can see folks can go in here and the various dots along the corridor are actually point locations where somebody has entered a specific comment, could be a concern, could be an observation, could be a desire for some future connectivity or a trail crossing or a linkage to a community. So there's all sorts of information that's been compiled on the crowdsource input tool. Kind of a good way for us to compile this information along such a broad and diverse corridor. Next slide, please. So in the course of our public meetings, one of the things I mentioned was the developing a vision statement. And here's the draft vision statement that's been established thus far. And it's gone through some public comment. And I think we're getting close to finalizing it, but welcome anyone's input on this. But I'm not going to read through it, but I think it highlights all of the aspects that we talked about earlier, this whole concept of multi-use, recreation, and alternative transportation. And also the really important connections to economic vitality of the communities and community economic development, as well as health, healthy lifestyles. So it's kind of a good combination of things. But again, this came entirely from the input that we got from the public during our input sessions. Next slide, please. So we talked about like, how do we take all this comments and all this feedback and how do we actually get to a management plan? And I think this slide does a really good shows a really good example of how we do that. We take what's on the web map and all the public comments and the comments from the public meeting and the stakeholder interviews, and we start distilling them down. This is kind of a bit like a funnel in a lot of ways. We summarize the input we've gotten by category, and you can see right here, this is about a month old. So the numbers represented after each of these bulleted items in that green box are larger now because we've gotten additional comments, but this just gives you an example of how we take this input and we distill it down further. We screen those ideas through the visions and goals statement, that draft vision that I just showed you, and there are goal statements that also go with it. And then we develop specific recommendations. And right now we're looking at basically 3 types of recommendations, those specific to how we manage the corridor, another category, maintenance and operations, and then the economic development and community connections component. So earlier I showed you the where we are in the process, and where we aren't yet quite to number 4, the developing recommendations. We're just starting that. So I don't have a lot of substance to talk about with either of these 3 distilled, but give me about a month and we'll have a lot more to discuss as far as specific recommendations along this realm.
Amy,
So-
can I ask you to pause for a second? I don't know how many more slides you have. But my committee has been sitting here for an hour and 45 minutes, probably is in need of a quick break.
I think this might be it. Is it not? Oh, no, these slides were supposed to actually not be here. So you can just skip the next 3. This just goes into more detail about those 3 pots that I was talking about.
Well, that was good timing then. Let me leave you with a piece for your vision statement.
Sure.
About 3 weeks ago, I was at a meeting with the governor and Commissioner Schneider when they were doling out grants to various entities over on the Danville section of this trail at the old rail house. And I publicly said to them, we should not be considering this a final project, but rather to think about, for future purposes, extending the trail from St. Johnsbury, where it ends now, out through Moose River, up the Connecticut, and then over across the Canadian border to where it ends now in Swanton. That's just an idea to plant for the future, because I think the current rail trail is a wonderful opportunity for the state, and a trail of that length and magnitude would do wonders for the Northeast Kingdom. So I'm going to put that plug in there and hope you you chew on that for a while and think about how could you get that whole project started.
I can promise you, you won't forget it, because I'll be there.
You can't do much more with Northeast Kingdom.
Hey. All right.
Hey.
Committee, we're gonna take a quick break. We're gonna be back at 5 minutes of 3.